Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you drive along in your car or your truck, or put in those earbuds and take it all in while you're on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the various scams associated with property rentals. That's quite a big issue in Sydney, where even if you're on the average wage and you're living within the sort of inner and middle distance, even some of the outer suburbs now, that between 60 and 65% of your wage is taken up just with a modest one bedroom apartment. That's how expensive real estate. Now, Sydney is the most expensive city in Australia, but the difference between Sydney and other cities isn't vast. So it's comparable, if you like, in other places as well. But I'll focus on Sydney here for the purposes of this presentation. I live in Sydney, by the way. So now there's a whole lot of reasons why rents are so high, and why mortgages are so expensive. Too much money sort of moved into it, and while interest rates are low, people aren't able to get a return on their savings or their lazy capital or something like that. So they go and look at other areas like real estate and shares on the stock market. So they look at other options apart from just saving in the bank, and real estate's being a big part of that. Now the real estate prices have been completely decoupled from supply and demand. So it's a completely manipulated and ginned up, jigged, faux market, if you like. It's not a real marketplace at all. I mean, you can generically call it the market, the real estate market, but it's really not a market. And I'll come back to, not a marketplace of supply and demand and so on that you learn about in high school economics class or something. So let's go through the various reasons why the rents are much higher than they need to be. And part of this conversation comes because an Australian regional government is talking big and tough about reforming or introducing a series of reforms that would prevent rental prices going through the roof. In a strict economic sense, I don't know how that's going to happen unless they make it as part of a wider package of reforms and so on. But anyway, let's go through that. Now, one of the reasons is rent auctioning, and I've got a whole, there's five main things here. But rent auctioning, this is where, and this particularly happens in the higher demand inner city, middle distance suburbs, or suburbs that have, say, got a rail or bus interchange, good public transport links, that sort of stuff. So it is, say 20, 30, or however many, you can get a lot more people turn up to view a property that's for rent. And it could be just an ordinary, like a 2-bedroom apartment, something like that. So they all turn up to rent, and the real estate people who are about as corrupt as you can possibly get, or many of them, not all of them, but many of them, they'll come to somebody, they'll huddle in the corner and talk in whispers, conspiratorial whispers, saying, look, if you'd like this property, so say I'll use round numbers here for simplicity's sake. Say the rent's advertised at $100 a week online advert, $100 a week. And the real estate agent comes to, look, those people over there, they're interested in this place, and but they're offering $150 a week. So I think you'd be a good tenant, so I'd like to give it to you, but what can we do? They're offering 150, but if you're prepared to offer 160, I can pretty much guarantee you now that you'll get the lease deal and the rental deal on this apartment. So they do this sort of stuff, and they huddle in the corner, lots of whispers and so on. But then after they've got 160, they then go back to the other guys who've allegedly offered 150. Say, look, those people have offered 160. what do you want to do? I mean, it's up to you. I'm not telling you what but if you want the place, you're going to have to beat 160. Okay, well, we'll do 170, and so on. So they do this type of thing. It's meant to be illegal, but no one seems to want to clamp down on it. It's just allowed to sort of go through, and there's no, and if you agree to it, then you've agreed. So what's the point? You agreed. You agreed that you allowed yourself to be hustled, so it's your fault. No, and so on. So this needs to be. So there's talk about clamping down further and harder on this sort of thing, and that really needs to be done because it's a fucking outrage. The other thing is, and I've mentioned this many times before, is as part of international labour hire scams and syndicates and all sorts of international tax arbitrage and things like that. The offshore investors who also own, say, restaurants or coffee shops or labour hire firms, that sort of thing, they'll buy an apartment with offshore money or a house or whatever it might be, a property, and then they'll fill it full of their labour hire workers. It could be the prostitutes, it could be cleaners, it could be anything, and a minibus will pull up outside the place, and 12 people will get in there off to do the cleaning job, or work 12-hour shifts at coffee shops and restaurants, washing dishes or painting nails in beauty salons and so on. so they're used for, and they're being packed in 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment, and there's Indians that are, there was one place in a apartment in a block we were renting for a little while, and they had 17 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. and so this sort of thing goes on. Now, on the other side, just in private rental, groups of Indians and Chinese, probably more Indians on this one, but Chinese too, they will outbid. And there are real estate rental brokers out there running around from India and China. Again, Indians are probably more the offenders here, and they'll go to a real estate or property owner or a real estate agent, either one, and they'll say, "Look, we can pay well above the market price for rent. So if the rent is $100 a week, we'll pay you $150 or $200 or something like that." But we're gonna put 20 people into this 2-bedroom apartment, 20 Indians into this 2-bedroom apartment. So, and they're going to pool all the resources to pay the rent. But on a per head basis, it's going to be much cheaper for these Indians to live, and they come from a place where 1 million people live in one room anyway. So now they've got the added benefit of running water and a flushing toilet and so on. So these they get cozy with the real estate agents and again the property owners, whatever, and then they purposely wait until a property becomes available, or the real estate will go to the property owner and say, "Look, we can arrange for you to double your rental take. So if you're getting $100 a week, well, we can fix it so you get $200 a week. What would you like to do? Do you want to kick out the current tenant, or do you want to put up the rent substantially so they go, oh, screw that, I'm out of here, and then we can give it to this Indian rental broker, who'll then put 20 Indian peasants in there, and you get double the rent." And so a lot of not all, but a lot of property owners go, yeah, why not? Hey. But isn't it illegal to have 20 people into 2? Well, it is, but the councils and the government and the regulators, they kind of looking the other way these days. I don't think they'll bother us. It won't be a problem for us. I'm pretty confident we can get away with this. So that's also a big issue, by the way, widespread, and that needs to be clamped down on. But it's part of the wider mass immigration scheme, the cheap labour. All the illiterate peasants running around as cleaners and burger flippers and dishwashers and so on. And, the globalist controlled governments, they don't really want to interfere with that. It's something they want. And so I don't know whether that clampdown will occur, but it certainly needs to be. And it's a big issue because the family, the local white family with the the mum, dad, and the couple of kids or something, they can't compete with that. And they're abiding by the rules and the laws and so on, where these other people aren't, and they're getting away with it. But they have the effect of pricing the local people out of the out of the market there. So so this is now the other, the offshore labour hire sort of doves into that same type thing. Now, there's also a big thing with Indian Brahmins, and because the tax rates in India are quite high, so there's a lot of incentive for these Brahmins to move their money offshore, as there is with the rich people in Mexico, all these sort of places, China. And so they want to move their money offshore, and real estate's a pretty good place to invest it. And you'll find in any of these big corrupt authoritarian economies and countries, you'll find all of these rich people have bolt holes all over the world. And I was surprised that one of the richest families in, I think it was Indonesia, I mean, I was staggered to see the extent of their real estate holdings worldwide, including this massive mansion in Australia in a beautiful tree-lined all-white street, by the way. So there's a lot of money laundering type real estate purchasing that goes on. Thousands of hundreds of thousands of properties that are left vacant. They may put someone into it for 1 month a year or something like that, and but otherwise they're vacant properties. And this represents something like 250,000 properties are vacant, some in need of repair and so on. So but 250,000 properties that are left vacant or largely vacant, left vacant for more than 6 months of the year, and this again has a huge effect on the supply of property. You see, especially some of the new apartment blocks that are put up, and they've sprung up all over Sydney. Where there used to be single-story housing, there's now forests of tower apartment blocks, and it makes the place look fucking ugly, by the way. But anyway, they're these 1930s bungalow type homes that you'd think they'd be almost National Trust type stuff, but they've all gone now and been replaced with these forests of tower apartment blocks. But these are mostly bought off, not all, but mostly bought off the plan by offshore investors. They're not being bought by local people. And these people, again, it's just an investment money laundering thing. They don't live there. Nobody lives there. They may come once a year for a vacation or something like that, or maybe one of their relatives stays there for a short while. But these places are left vacant for years at a time, and again has a big effect. So there needs to be a real clamp down on money laundering and the vacant properties that are, by extension, part of that money laundering scam. The other thing, and one more thing, is investment properties that require a low deposit to get into it. So, a 10% deposit, that sort of thing. Now, it used to be for an investment property, you had to have quite a large deposit, say 30% plus, that sort of thing. Now, that meant that people acquiring an investment property were less susceptible or vulnerable to changes in cash flow circumstances or changes in interest rates, because the rent they could collect would be approximately equal to the repayments they would have to meet. So now as the price of real estate increased, then that equation did change somewhat, where the rent you collect may not be enough to cover the payments. But then there was something in Australia, and there are similar type programs around the world called negative gearing. So say you've got a job where you pay $100 a week in tax, and you've got a $50 shortfall in the repayments you make, and the rent you collect is $50 a week, but the repayments are $100. That $50 difference, you then can write it off against your income tax. So it can be you make the payments on the property, but you have no income tax to pay because you write off your tax against the additional payments you have to make. It's called negative gearing. And now this became quite popular when real estate prices were increasing hysterically. If there's a stall or a slowdown in real estate price increases, as in to purchase, or the interest rates start to go up because the interest rates were historically very low, then a lot of people are caught out because they've only got to put a small deposit down. So if they're buying $1 million property, they've only got to find $100,000 to get into it. Whereas, in days gone by, you had to find $350,000 to get into it, as in buy the property. So a low entry level means that people are highly geared. That is, they have a much larger debt, and the repayments are much bigger than the rent they're collecting, and so they have to somehow make up that difference. So if their income circumstances change or interest rates go up, they have to put up the price of the rent to cover that differential. And this means that because there are so many highly geared people out there, then they're much more exposed to having to put the rents up than in days gone by. So this is also a big issue, and until they return to a situation of much higher entry level deposit and other modifications and changes, then I don't know if there's going to be much movement in that area. But those are some of the key, just apart from insane inflation on real estate prices generally. Those are some of the key things. To what extent they would reduce or slow down the inflation in rents is harder to say. I think it would have a big effect. If 250,000 properties suddenly come onto the available for rent, then that's a big change in things, and stopping people from this renting 20 to a room. That the one argument there is that if you get 20 Indians renting a one-bedroom apartment type thing, if they can't do that, then the 20 of them, each of them will go and get an individual apartment. Well, they can't do that. They don't have that sort of, illiterate third world peasants don't have that sort of income. So they would just not come to Australia or not come to the West unless they could run these scams. And that would be, I think, of overall benefit. Maybe not perhaps as the globalists would see it. The offshore money laundering and the vast buying up of Western real estate by offshore money launderers, that needs to be dealt with. I'm not sure it ever will be. The political class in the West are just benefiting too substantially from that. So I'm not sure that'll be. The offshore labour hire scam firms that buying up real estate just to house all their peasant workers. I don't know if that'll change either, but it needs to. I think the rent bidding and the rent auctioning, rent shilling, where they go to one party and say, hey, why don't you pay a bit more because those guys, that sort of thing. I think there might be a clamp down there. I'm hoping so. But that's probably the only thing where I think there's supposed to be a limit on just how much the rent can be put up in any given sort of 12-month period. But even that's sort of not, if you don't increase rent for 3 years, then technically you have the right to increase the rent by 35% on the next year. So this is insane, and that I think needs to be looked at. Probably the only sensible proposal I can see from this is that they're claiming in this sort of like a discussion paper, if you will, that bonds, when anybody rents an apartment or any property for that matter, they have to put a bond in, which is usually approximately a month's rent, give or take, and in that that bond is when the lease or the rental period ends, that bond is then given back to the renter. Typically, there's a lot of argy-bargy as the property owner, particularly if it's a real estate management company, tries to pressure the renter to make all sorts of engage in all sorts of expenses in extra levels of cleaning and that sort of stuff. So there's often a lot of disputes around that. And one of the things that they're apparently looking at in the discussion paper is to make bonds portable. So instead of you getting the bond back each time, or the renter getting the bond back each time, they can transport it to the next property they may rent, or take the cash, as the case may be. So that I think's worthwhile. At least it avoids the possibility of discord and disputation and things like that might occur. So, but overall, There's a lot of things need to be done that probably won't be done, but they do need to be done, and I think they all contribute in varying ways to the artificial, and it is artificial. It's not market driven at all. The artificial thing for rents. I'll add one other thing too. There's the media likes to hype up this idea that there was, a queue of 200 people to view one property, but they fail to observe that in the case of migrant groups, where you might get 20 people staying in the 2-bedroom apartment, that they may all turn up at once. So 200 people may only be, 10 different groups that are actually viewing the property. So that needs to be understood and appreciated as well. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Challenge. Thank you for listening.